Beneath one of the driest regions on Earth, scientists have confirmed the existence of billions of cubic meters of clean, ancient groundwater. Water that has been sitting in underground rock formations for centuries, largely untouched and largely unused. And in Burkina Faso, a government is now attempting to access that water through one of the most ambitious infrastructure programs the country has ever undertaken. This is not a story about miracles or political heroes. It is a story about water, science, infrastructure, and the very difficult challenge of building a functional system in one of the world's most challenging environments. Stay with me, because the details here are genuinely important, and they are not getting the attention they deserve in mainstream coverage. You are watching Strategic Dynamics Edge, the channel where we break down complex global stories with context, balance, and straight analysis. If that is the kind of content you are looking for, subscribe now and hit the bell so you never miss what we cover next. Leave a comment after watching. I genuinely read them, and your perspective on this story matters. Before we go any further, a quick note on sourcing and transparency. This video draws on published reports from the International Atomic Energy Agency, the United Nations Environment Program, the World Bank, peer-reviewed academic research, and publicly available news coverage. Where claims come from government sources or have not been independently verified, I will flag that clearly. This channel is committed to presenting information honestly, including its limitations. With that said, let us get into the story. Somewhere in the interior of Burkina Faso, a drilling rig pushes through 30 meters of laterite, that dry, iron-rich crust that defines the Sahel landscape, and reaches water, ancient groundwater. Clean, deep, and according to a major scientific study published by the International Atomic Energy Agency in 2017, present in far larger quantities beneath this region than most of the world realizes. That moment, a borehole breaking through into a hidden reservoir, is the physical symbol of what Burkina Faso's government is now attempting to turn into a national strategy. And understanding that strategy requires understanding the environment it is operating in. The Sahel is not a country. It is a climatic zone, a semi-arid belt stretching roughly 5,400 kilometers across the African continent, from Senegal in the west to Eritrea in the east, sandwiched between the Sahara Desert to the north and wetter savannas to the south. The United Nations Environment Program has documented that over 135 million people live in this region, and it is consistently identified as one of the most climate-vulnerable areas on the planet. Burkina Faso sits directly in the middle of it, landlocked, drought-prone, with more than 80% of its population depending on agriculture and livestock for their livelihoods. The challenge this creates is significant. In a country where farming is the foundation of survival for most of the population, reliable water access has historically been extremely limited. That limitation has deep historical roots. During the French colonial period, the territory then called Upper Volta saw infrastructure investment focused primarily on extractive purposes, railways to move cotton and minerals to coastal ports. Irrigation systems to support local food production were not a colonial priority. When Burkina Faso gained independence in 1960, it inherited an economy and an infrastructure base shaped by that colonial logic, rather than by the needs of its own population. There were attempts to change this. Between 1983 and 1987, President Thomas Sankara pursued an ambitious domestic development agenda that included irrigation projects, large-scale tree planting to combat desertification, and policies aimed at boosting food production. Contemporary accounts and subsequent academic analysis credit these policies with meaningful improvements in food availability during that period. Sankara was killed in October 1987. The government that followed ruled for nearly 3 decades. According to published data from the United Nations Environment Program, by 2013, only 63% of people in rural Burkina Faso had access to clean drinking water. The government itself acknowledged at that time that the country had entered a period of persistent water stress, with demand increasingly likely to outpace supply during dry seasons. The security crisis that intensified from around 2015 onward added further strain. By 2022, over 1 million people had been displaced by conflict in parts of the country. Farmland was abandoned in affected areas, water infrastructure was damaged or made inaccessible. The humanitarian situation was serious and well documented by international agencies. In September 2022, Ibrahim Traore, a 34-year-old military officer, came to power following Burkina Faso's second coup that year. His government has since taken a number of significant policy directions, including the expulsion of French troops, reduced engagement with certain regional institutions, and a stated emphasis on what he has called self-reliance and national sovereignty. These political decisions are contested and carry real risks, which we will discuss. But alongside those political moves, his administration has also pursued a concrete infrastructure agenda, particularly around water, that is worth examining on its own terms. If this story is prompting questions or thoughts for you, drop them in the comments right now. I want to know what you are thinking as we go through this, and if you know someone who would find this valuable, share the video. It helps the channel and it gets important information to more people. In March 2025, according to a report published by Africa Digest News, Traore's Council of Ministers approved a $145 million water security initiative, a 6-year plan designed to overhaul significant parts of Burkina Faso's water infrastructure. The report describes the project as a direct response to escalating water scarcity, worsened by climate change, desertification, and unreliable rainfall. It is worth noting that this figure and many of the implementation details come primarily from government sources and state-aligned media. Independent verification of progress on the ground is currently limited due to security conditions and restrictions on press access in parts of the country, a limitation we should be honest about when evaluating the claims. With that caveat clearly stated, here is what the initiative is reported to include. 35 major dams are to be rehabilitated. Many were built decades ago and have suffered from structural deterioration and climate-related damage. 788 hectares of irrigated farmland are to be developed or restored, with modern irrigation methods intended to enable year-round cultivation rather than purely rain-dependent seasonal farming. 15 critical water reservoirs are to be replenished to maintain supply for households, livestock, and crops during dry periods. 80 community-led water management committees are to be established, placing local communities rather than central bureaucracies in charge of managing their own water resources. 15 new fish ponds are planned to develop aquaculture capacity, and 5,000 hectares of degraded land are targeted for restoration to address ongoing desertification. At the center of the longer-term vision is a national water fund, a financing mechanism designed to support future projects, maintain existing infrastructure, and fund research into sustainable water management. The project is reported to span 8 regions, selected based on water scarcity levels, agricultural importance, and economic potential. One of the aspects that analysts have noted as particularly significant is the stated intention to finance this primarily through domestic revenue, rather than foreign loans or international aid. Whether that goal is fully achieved in practice remains to be seen, but the stated commitment to domestic financing is a meaningful policy signal. To understand why this particular moment and this particular initiative matter, it is essential to understand what the science has revealed about the Sahel's groundwater. In 2017, the International Atomic Energy Agency published the results of a 4-year, 13-country scientific project that mapped groundwater across the Sahel region. This is publicly available and well documented. Scientists used isotopic techniques to assess the origin, age, and quality of water in 5 major shared aquifer systems beneath the region. Their findings were striking. The studies confirmed the presence of large volumes of good quality groundwater suitable for human consumption across significant parts of the Sahel. Water that had been accumulating underground for centuries, in some cases for thousands of years, in systems that were largely unmapped and substantially unused. The aquifer systems identified include the Liptako-Gourma system, which sits directly beneath Burkina Faso, along with the Senegalo-Mauritanian Basin, the Lake Chad Basin, and others. Together, these systems represent a substantial freshwater resource. In neighboring Niger, a separate study conducted with funding from the Millennium Challenge Corporation estimated approximately 50 billion cubic meters of available groundwater, a figure roughly 10 times the volume of Lake Chad, the region's largest surface water body. As the World Bank's Sahel groundwater research has documented, groundwater is already the primary drinking water source for up to 75% of Africa's population. Yet groundwater-based irrigation currently accounts for only 9 to 12% of irrigated farmland in the western and central Sahel. The gap between what is confirmed to exist underground and what is actually being accessed and used is significant. That gap is what Burkina Faso's borehole drilling program is attempting to begin closing. There is an instructive precedent from elsewhere in the region. Libya's Great Man-Made River Project, launched in 1984, constructed a massive pipeline network to transport groundwater from Saharan aquifers to coastal population centers. According to Encyclopedia Britannica, it became the largest groundwater transport system ever built, moving approximately 2.5 million cubic meters of water daily. The engineering principle, accessing deep aquifers to supply surface communities, was validated by that project. Burkina Faso's approach differs in scale and in design philosophy. Rather than a centralized mega-infrastructure project, the initiative is building a distributed network of boreholes, rehabilitated dams, community reservoirs, and local management structures designed to bring water closer to where rural populations actually live and farm. This decentralized approach aligns with what decades of resource management research has found. The most durable community water systems tend to be ones where the people who depend on the resource are also the ones managing it day to day. The 80 community water committees built into this initiative reflect that principle. Whether they are implemented effectively is a different question, and an important one. Now let us be direct about the risks and challenges, because a balanced assessment requires it. The scale of this investment, while significant for Burkina Faso, addresses only a portion of the country's total water infrastructure needs. The country has an estimated potential of 46,000 hectares of irrigable land. This initiative targets 788 hectares. That is meaningful progress, but it represents a small fraction of what would be needed for comprehensive national water security. Much larger and sustained investment over many years would be required to close the full gap. Groundwater sustainability is a genuine scientific concern. The IAEA's own researchers specifically warned in the 2017 report that governments must act promptly to protect these aquifers from pollution and over-extraction because the conditions can change relatively quickly. Libya's experience is instructive here. The aquifers feeding its great man-made river are being drawn down faster than they naturally recharge. Any long-term water strategy for Burkina Faso must take aquifer sustainability seriously, not just access. Governance quality is another critical variable. A peer-reviewed study published in the journal Agriculture in February 2025, examining 6 community-managed irrigation systems in Burkina Faso, found persistent challenges including water wastage and lower than expected agricultural yields despite years of operation. Infrastructure investment alone does not guarantee effective outcomes. The quality of the institutions managing that infrastructure matters enormously. Political stability presents a real and documented concern. Traore's government has, according to multiple credible reports, survived several coup attempts since taking power. His administration has dissolved political parties and imposed significant restrictions on press freedom and civil society. These are serious governance issues. Political economists have consistently found that concentrated, unchecked authority creates institutional fragility regardless of the stated intentions of those in power. If the political situation changes, the continuity of long-term infrastructure programs becomes uncertain. That is a risk that any honest assessment must include. Climate change adds further complexity. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change projects that the Sahel will experience increasingly erratic rainfall patterns in coming decades. More intense precipitation compressed into shorter periods, more frequent flooding, and changes to how groundwater systems recharge. Infrastructure built today must be designed with these projected changes in mind, not just with historical climate patterns. And finally, the verification challenge is real and should not be minimized. The government's reported achievements, including the claim made at the end of 2025 that Burkina Faso had achieved food self-sufficiency, come primarily from official government sources. Independent researchers, journalists, and international monitors have limited access to verify these figures on the ground. The trajectory of increased agricultural production is broadly consistent with the policies implemented, but the specific numbers deserve independent scrutiny before being treated as established fact. Here's what we can say with confidence based on publicly available evidence. The groundwater is real. The IAEA mapping is credible peer-reviewed science. The aquifers beneath Burkina Faso and the wider Sahel exist and contain significant freshwater reserves. A government in Burkina Faso is now investing in accessing those resources through documented infrastructure programs. The challenges are also real. The scale is large, the resources are finite, the institutions are fragile, and independent monitoring is limited. Whether this initiative succeeds in building durable water security for Burkina Faso is genuinely uncertain. It depends not just on the engineering, but on the governance, the sustainability of financing, the stability of political conditions, and the ability of communities to manage these resources over the long term. These are not small variables. But perhaps the most important question this story raises is a broader one. The science confirming large groundwater reserves beneath the Sahel has been available for years. The need has been documented for decades. Why has systematic investment in accessing and distributing this resource been so slow? What structural factors, economic, political, historical, have shaped the gap between what is known to exist underground and what has actually been built above ground? That question is worth sitting with, regardless of what you think of any particular government or political figure. That is the story of Burkina Faso's water initiative. Ambitious, documented, genuinely significant, and honestly uncertain. Thank you for watching all the way through. If this video gave you something to think about, leave a comment below. Your perspective adds real value to this conversation. Share it with someone who follows African development or geopolitics, because these are discussions that deserve a wider audience. Subscribe to Strategic Dynamics Edge if you are not already part of this community, and I will see you in the next video.